The risk to our nation of not letting them be exposed to a little bit of physical risk is bigger than the physical risk that we put them in. I want our kids to touch it, taste it, feel it, and do it.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast, everybody. I am the sometimes host, Isaac Morehouse, and today I'm joined by Mark Hyatt, who is the founder of Falcon Aerolab. And I'm so excited about this conversation because I met Mark through Matt Bowman not that long ago. And hearing Mark talk about the stuff that he's doing with Falcon Aerolabs, which is one of our partners here at OpenEd, it got me so excited. We talk a lot on this podcast about different ways to think about education and different unique approaches to learning. Every kid needs different things, and whether it be approaching a similar subject in a new way or approaching a subject you never thought of, this conversation is going to be really cool because Falcon Aerolabs, let's just get to the punchline. You're getting middle school and high school kids up in airplanes sometimes. And you said before we went on, yeah, we had this great camp. We had kids going up. They all had a great time. Only a couple of them needed to use the barf bags, but it was great. Maybe we start there with what in the world would make you decide that it was a good idea to get middle school and high school kids up in the air, learning about aeronautics. I know you guys do a lot more than just aviation, but what's prompted you to start this company in the first place?
Well, and thank you, Isaac, for having me on board here. And, if you look at our country, we excel and lead the world in certain areas. And one is aerospace and aviation. And I know we've got competitors overseas in France and Brazil and in Canada, but we're still number one. And that's one of our core competencies is that. I know Silicon Valley with the cyber and this IT and all that. But I live in Colorado, and Colorado is the number one state per capita for aerospace and aviation jobs. And I'd say we've been number one for like 18 of the last 20 years. And California, of course, has more jobs, but they have 40 million people and we only have 5 point something. But per capita, but we import most of our labor for these great jobs. And these are jobs starting at six figures and going up. And I just think that we should, hire Colorado kids and prepare them. But then as a national citizen and an American, I would like to do this in other states and the whole country if there's interest. And with the move in our country, and I'm going to give your generation credit because I'm 72 years old, but I've still got a lot of airspeed, as we say in the aviation industry. But your generation is very discerning when it comes to education. I deal with mostly parents your age, and they want whatever they want, the way they want it, and right now. And guess what? I've gotten really good at saying yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, to all those people. And okay, you want it for your child this way? How can we do that? And that's not the norm in K-12 education across our country. It hasn't been that way for 75 years. So thank you to your generation for demanding better. Now, we meet a lot of resistance from the establishment and the system, but OpenEd, Falcon Aerolab, that's what motivated me. I'm an innovator and a change agent, and I'm just glad to be in touch with you.
I love it. Well, I want to get just a little bit of your personal story and then dive in a little bit more to why you think even if a kid is not going to end up going into the aviation industry, what are some of the advantages of kind of approaching STEM and learning some of these concepts through this lens? But let's get to your story first, just a little bit of your background. I know you served in the Air Force. I know you worked for a couple different White House administrations. You've been in the school choice movement for years. You've been a part of various charter schools. Give me like a nutshell version of your own story, that everything kind of leading up to the founding of Falcon Aerolabs.
I got an orientation ride when I was 12 years old, which was 1964, I think it was. Yeah, I'm 72 now. And my dad paid $5, and I went up flying for about 15, 20 minutes, and I was hooked. I quit the Boy Scouts and I went over and joined the Civil Air Patrol. I came from kind of a lower middle class family outside of Philadelphia, and I just knew that there wasn't money for this. So I just needed to join organizations that could help me pursue this passion. I got interested in as a teenager you could call me kind of a nerd or a geek, but when all my friends wanted to go out and do bad things and get in trouble, I said, well, the FAA doesn't really want me to smoke that stuff or do this stuff. A lot of things, when you have a why in your life as a teenager, you don't get in as much trouble. And I didn't get in trouble. I mean, I probably should have studied more, but I studied when I finally got to the Air Force Academy, and that went actually better than high school.
That is such, I will pause for 1 second.
Yeah.
That is such a great point, Mark, that, there's often a question like, how much should you let kids pursue things that are really interesting to them versus things that you think they really need to know to get into college or to get a career? And I'm not going to try to answer what that answer is for every parent, but one thing that never gets mentioned about pursuing things you're passionate about is what you just said. If a kid is doing something that they resonate with, that gives them meaning, the odds that they're going to get into other kinds of trouble and make other kinds of bad decisions go way down because they have something to lose. That's a great point.
Absolutely, Isaac. That's exactly it. So to me, and you're going to hear a lot of little phrases that I love. To be something different, you have to see something different. I had no aviation background. My dad was in the Army in the 40s and all that. And so I got that one flight. I'd never even thought about airplanes. And when I take kids up flying in my airplane, and I've bought many airplanes now, and I have other pilots that'll fly them because I just fly my one now, mostly. But to watch the kids get excited when they take off and when they're flying that airplane, I can tell sitting in the left seat of that airplane when I've got them hooked. And it's the coolest feeling for me. I mean, kids are 20% of our population, but they're 100% of the future. And I feel that my goal and job in life as an older guy is to pass the baton in this relay race called life to the next generation. So every kid, I say, you could be my replacement. I don't care if you're black, white, girl, boy, I don't care what you are. The airplane doesn't care either, by the way. So let's get excited about this and be my replacement. But all of this is built on a solid foundation of character. I like to say the 3 C's are what Aerolab's all about: college, career, and community ready. We want citizens that are going to be the right kind of neighbors that you and I want.
I think this applies to everything you do. Character is always paramount, but there are certain situations and circumstances that kind of, I guess, elevate or make more visible the problems with lack of character or the benefits of strong character. And one of those is flying. You are in a very potentially tense situation. If you are flying with other people, you have other people's lives in your hands. You have not only decision making, problem solving in real time, but also managing potentially the emotions of other people. There's a lot of trust involved. This is one of those situations where the kind of character you have can be seen, and it makes such a huge, potentially life and death difference that I think it's like you could maybe afford to say, we're going to learn finger painting and we're not going to worry about character as a foundation for good finger painting. You kind of can't afford to do that if you're putting somebody up in the cockpit of a plane. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. Oh my gosh, Isaac, you're right on it. Trust is the miracle ingredient. And you just said it when you were talking. Trust is the miracle ingredient because I have to trust the mechanic totally. I have to trust the air traffic controller. I have to trust the instructor. In other words, if we don't operate in an environment of trust, it doesn't work. I mean, it's like one of our sons runs multiple steel mills in Indiana. Well, my gosh, they're moving 2,000, 3,000 degree slag, around the mills, and it can burn people and vaporize people in a second. As in a lot of these industries and businesses, trust is key, but everybody has to do their job. And when I look at high performance teams, it requires every single team member to do their very best all the time. That's what I'm trying to do, is develop team kids that are going to be team members of high performance teams when they get to Lockheed or Boeing and So anyway, we could really go down some paths here.
On your story, you were hooked from that moment, from that flight, and then I'm assuming because you went into the Air Force that you were like, get me where I can fly.
Yeah.
When did you start to, or maybe this is always the case, when did you start to say, I want to help other people have that same moment that I had? When did
Okay.
that spark the kind of the education passion, which clearly
Yeah.
I've seen throughout your, when I look at your career bio, has it always been there, or was there a moment when you said, now I got to help others do the same?
And I didn't really answer your question about talking about me. Okay, I graduated from the Air Force Academy and became a fighter pilot in the Air Force and lived overseas 9 years. You're preparing for war, and then there are little wars here and there that you have to go do. But you do your best. But when you're 40, you're an old man or an old lady in that world, because then they promote you to colonel or general, and then you go out and you be in charge of others. And I actually found, as much as I loved high performance airplanes, Top Gun style, that was what I did, flying upside down and pulling G's and going supersonic, I actually enjoyed the leadership management part too. As a colonel, went out to the Air Force Academy. I ran their Character and Leadership Development Center, which is all the diversity, gender, racial, religious tolerance, lying, cheating, and stealing, all the stuff that none of the other colonels wanted to deal with because they were the head of the English department, the math department, the history department. They gave to me. But I actually found I loved dealing with that stuff, even though it was very, I had to go on the news a lot and explain why this cream of America's crop would do these incredibly dumb things to each other, to themselves, out in public, whatever. And they're good kids, but in the end, they're 18 to 22-year-olds, and they're experimenting in life and trying new things. And, even though they have high IQs, doesn't mean they're going to be ready to go out full up. So bottom line is, when I retired at age 50, I became a school superintendent. And I did that because I love young people. We had children, we have grandchildren now. And I just found that it's not money that motivates me. I have to have a noble mission. And so it took me till I was 40 or 50 to figure that out, that it wasn't money that was the key thing. And it was making a difference in young people. And so that's where when I became a school superintendent from 50 to 60 years old, that's where I really learned a lot about K-12 education and got excited about, especially your generation, demanding different things. They wanted character education, character across the curriculum. They wanted it, integrity woven into everything that we were doing at school. I mean, your generation's trying to make this country better. And I'm really proud of your generation for that. And I'm trying to lead the way and be a good example and role model and encourager to all the young people. And I would hire people that have that same passion. And then when I was 60, I retired again from the school system. And that's when I ran a nonprofit. It was the National Clearinghouse of Character Education. And then I was asked by President Obama to go in and help him after the Newtown Sandy Hook shootings, and I did that. And then I was asked by the Trump administration to be a speechwriter for Ivanka when she would come out here to Colorado, and I helped them do that. So I'm anybody that's for kids, I'm going to help. I don't care about R's and D's. How am I doing so far?
Oh, I love it. You know what I'm so, it's so good to hear you say, and I like that you're referring to me as a young person, because I was joking before this. I'm 40. My kids don't think that it can get any older than me. But your optimism and your appreciation for things in, let's say, my generation or even people younger than me, because I think you're onto something. There is a combination of, on the negative side, I would call it maybe entitlement, expectation that I deserve things to be the way I want them to be. On the positive side, it's a refusal to settle for things that aren't as good as they could be. And hey, I want the best education for my kids. I want to customize everything. I don't want to just accept things prepackaged. And that's such a good, the fact that you can see the virtue in that and not just turn into shaking your stick at the kids these days. I gotta commend you for that. So let's dive in a little bit to kind of the specifics of what goes on and the learning opportunities for kids when they approach, I guess, aerospace in general. And I know there's various different sort of sub disciplines within there, but One of the first things that comes to my mind is, as a parent, it feels very daunting or inaccessible. If you say, hey, it's really great for kids to learn about aviation and aerospace, I'm like, yeah, that sounds cool, but where do I start? I don't have an airplane. I don't know where the nearest airstrip is. Like, how do I even introduce my kids to this to find out if they're interested in it? It feels overwhelming. What would you say to a parent who's listening and who's like, okay, I'm curious. Where do I start? How do I introduce my kids to this concept and see if it's something that maybe is worth pursuing?
I'll start with the two coins of the realm in the K-12 world are student time and money. Those are and I'm just saying this because I'm older and I've been through it. It's hard to get the establishment to even give you the time in the day. I mean, schools are like minimum security prisons now with all the security and all the things. And I understand all that, why we do that. And then just getting the right people in front of the students is difficult. And then there's the money part. And I noticed there's about 10 or 11 states now that have gone to these ESAs where they actually let the parents decide, because it's your money. It's your money. I want to serve you because you're the customer. But that's not the way the school districts have generally worked in the last 75 years in our country. And I think parents are the primary educators in a child's life. And so that's what motivates me to serve you until I take my last breath. And I'm going to do everything I can. I'll give you one example. When I first dreamt up Falcon Aerolab 7+ years ago, I went to my superintendent buddies around Colorado and I said, well, what do you think about kids flying airplanes, gliders, helicopters, hot air balloons, vertical wind tunnel with STEM lessons integrated? And they said, are you kidding me? You're going to put kids in airplanes. They're going to die. And I don't want that liability or that risk. Our risk manager would never go for that. I said, well, yeah, they could die. 7.5 years later, thank God nobody's died. I said, number one, dying on the interstate through all the interstates that's the scariest thing. I mean,
Should cancel the school busing program because,
So there are impediments, but my favorite phrase is impediment removal. In other words, if money's your problem, I'll find money for you. If transportation's your problem, we'll figure it out. There's, kid-friendly Ubers, there's carpools. And if language is your problem, I've got Spanish speakers on my staff. You tell me what your problem is, the impediment to your child reaching their dreams, and I'm going to remove it. I sound like I'm running for office, but I'm not.
No, I mean, it's just the genuineness of the passion is there. It comes through. And I think that's like, clearly it's infectious and it attracts people to what you're doing and makes them curious and makes them want to be a part of it. I'm wondering if you have short of getting up in that plane for that first experience, which I think nothing can come close to just experiencing it yourself and having, I remember the first time I was probably trying to remember, maybe 10, 11, 12, somewhere in there. And I had a really good friend. We were all really into like military planes, Top Gun, all that kind of stuff. And for his birthday, his dad surprised him and got some local guy with a little 6-seater Cessna to fly us from Michigan to Ohio to, there was a museum there. It was like an Air Force museum in Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton. We just did a
flew
field
to Dayton in this little plane, got to have the headphones. I mean, I will never forget it. It was incredible. So like getting everyone to that moment, as many people as you can, I feel I totally understand like the key there. Let's say short of that, you're not able or ready or willing to go up in a plane yet or let your kid. Is there any kind of do you have sort of introductory material or online courses that kind of help introduce the concepts and tease at these things prior to actually getting up in a plane?
Yes, and one of them we actually partner with OpenEd. I think it's Introduction to Aerospace, where they can get one flight, get two if they really like it, and they do an online course. It's called Over the Horizon that we broadcast out, and it's virtual. We put that into Oregon and Utah, and actually worked a little bit with Tech Trep over there in Idaho too. But bottom line is it's a survey course, almost a Smithsonian survey course, and we bring in astronauts and the weather presenters from TV to talk about meteorology, and we bring in mechanics, and we bring in people that have flown the coolest airplanes in the world, and then we broadcast it out and let them just tell their story and get these kids excited. And I think storytelling is the coolest way. And then they get to have a flight if they want. It can be a very short flight. It can be a little bit longer. And we set that up with a flight school or somebody in that community. And so I see this expanding nationwide where we can do this for all 50 states. So that's in our future. I'll run the ball down the field as much as I can in the next 10, 15 years. And then I'm going to train up all these young people your age to do it and then get out of your way.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's interesting. So many people talk about subjects in the abstract, like STEM, like, okay, technology and engineering and then math and science. And these are really important. And there's this, everyone's worried there's a deficit and American kids don't know as much as they should. And all that's fine. I'm not criticizing that. But when you put yourself in the shoes of a child, they don't care about an abstraction like STEM. They don't care about an abstraction like math. They care about actual concrete, tangible things. And if you say, do you want to learn engineering? Like, why? What is engineering? If you say, hey, do you want to learn how to launch a satellite into orbit? Now we're talking about something interesting. It captures the imagination. It's concrete. And so just hearing you list off things I hadn't even thought of about related to aerospace, like meteorology, like trying to predict storms and help people evacuate for hurricanes. And that's really interesting to kids. Kids are fascinated by storms. Anything to do with launching vehicles or anything into orbit, flying airplanes, like there's so much that these are kind of like the big optimistic dreamer type of problems that I think America had sort of several decades where that was like the big thrust. And I feel like we kind of been in a space where we're all kind of feeling a little negative and beaten down and thinking and turning our attention to something that captivates the imagination like that, something big and heroic.
Yep.
That's how you get kids interested in STEM,
Well, that's it. And you've nailed it right on the head there. I want our kids to touch it, taste it, feel it, and do it. Because what I've seen in K-12 education is they get to learn about it because the school district lawyers are much more comfortable with them sitting in a classroom than they are out doing something. But the kids, and I hate to say this, especially boys, need action. We want to get out and do things. And we have lots of girls do too, but we do have 75% boys right now. I'm trying to get more and more girls. We have about 25%. But if you look at the pilots in America, 6.8% are women, 1.6% are black. Hispanics don't even register. Almost everybody looks like us. Okay, I would love to double those percentages before I kick the bucket. That's one of my little agendas here because the airplane doesn't care, the spaceship doesn't care, as long as you can do the job. And so I try to find the role models for these underrepresented groups and really get them in front of kids. And there are really good role models. There's just so much here. The sky's the limit. That's kind of a no, so I just think the reason Aerolab has grown from 7 summers ago, summer 17 to now, we had 14 students in our first class, and we now are going to be impacting over 13 to 1,400 students in 3 states. We'll add Arizona this fall, but I would love to take this nationwide and help thousands, tens of thousands, whatever it is. And if OpenEd wants to partner in that, let's figure out how to do it. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you and your team have enthusiasm.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our mission is to help parents open up their kids' education to all the options on the table and to be able to pick and choose and combine and take things like Falcon Aerolabs and say, hey, this is a great piece. This is a great building block in my kids' education. And things that like this that you may never have thought of were possible. I think so much of what a child does or what a parent does is shaped by what they believe is possible. And if you've never seen it, and most people haven't been exposed to aviation. Most people don't have a friend who flies a plane. Right. And so they haven't had that exposure. So they don't even know it's among the option sets. And what you said when we opened up, that this is an industry that there's so many job opportunities, and these are incredibly well-paying jobs. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina for a while. There was a Boeing facility there building the Dreamliners. Right. And it was crazy. They couldn't find enough people. They couldn't hire enough. And these are like amazing jobs. And I think a lot of people don't know that or don't know where to start. So I think it's just incredibly exciting. What is something that maybe you have like a specific story or something of a student or a couple different stories, maybe like unlikely successes or unexpected outcomes for getting kids
Yeah.
exposed to aeronautics?
Okay. My number two is an amazing woman who homeschooled her four kids, but she's married to a farmer. And they live about 2.5 hours southeast of Colorado Springs, which is down towards the Kansas-Oklahoma border. And somehow she found out about her, Sarah, the mom, found out about us, and her 12-year-old daughter, who was the oldest of the four kids, had the privilege of giving her one of her first airplane rides. I think it was her second ride, because I arranged for the first, and then I took her in my airplane. So she then got in our program. She was in our first class of kids, and she was 12, turned 13. And then we started expanding Aerolab, so we started a glider program, IFT, Introductory Flight Training Gliders. And we have IFT drones, where they get their FAA Part 107 drone, and we get them jobs in drones. We have pilot, IFT powered, where we get them airline jobs, commercial jobs. So Ella, the young lady, her mom drove her 2.5 hours to Colorado Springs from the farm down towards Lamar, Colorado. And she soloed at 14 in gliders. And she was like the most excited 14-year-old that exists on the planet. So then she said, this is what I want to do. So we got her in as a 15-year-old and 16-year-old. She soloed in powered airplanes at 16. And we kept her going, and she got her commercial pilot's license, her instructor license, and her instrument license at 18. She was immediately offered, they asked her to come down to Pueblo, Colorado, where they train the Air Force cadets after they graduate from the Air Force Academy, starting her at $100,000 a year, no college. Just come teach these kids how to fly. Yeah, they're all college grads. We don't care that you're not, but you're really a good pilot. And I've flown with her lots. She's an amazing pilot, an amazing instructor. And that's just one example that now, not every mom is willing to drive their kids 2.5 hours. But when you live out in the country, that's what people do. They drive to the population centers where Colorado Springs is the number 2 city in Colorado, but this is where I live, so this is where we started, and now we're expanding it and doing this for lots and lots of more young people. So that's a pretty good story.
Oh, that's an amazing story. I knew you would have something right off the cuff. So I gotta imagine, and we touched on this a little bit already, but I gotta imagine that like the number one thing you hear all the time is safety concern. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious your thoughts on, exposing kids to risk. How much risk? What should you let kids do? And I know I've read a lot of different educators and different approaches. People saying, "Hey, let your kids use power tools when they're young. This is okay. Physical risk is not the worst thing." And I think there's a lot to be said for that. But as a parent, it's still scary. Yeah. And as an educator, if you're responsible for other people's kids, the idea of having them flying in an airplane is scary. What is your sort of philosophy on the risk involved in aviation, but just in general with kids? Are we too concerned to shelter kids from things that might be dangerous?
I'll just say that the risk to our nation of not letting them be exposed to a little bit of physical risk is bigger than the physical risk that we put them in. Now, I know that's a very broad answer, but we can probably debate that a lot, and we'll have another chance, I assume. But as far as the airplanes, I hire a lot of these retired airline pilots, military pilots. That happens to be my network mostly. I make sure we have very highly qualified pilots teaching them. Now, I know that in the Colorado Springs area, we're near the Air Force Academy. It's the whole Pikes Peak area is beautiful, and that's where a lot of these guys come back and retire. But that is my number one concern. Safety is first. I say STEM, aerospace, built on a solid foundation of character, but the thing it's resting on is safety. And I have meetings with the pilots. I have meetings with the mechanics. In other words, that has to be number one in everything we do, no matter what it is. And
yeah, I love what you said there to open, that you can't assess the risk of one thing in a vacuum and pretend that the alternative is a world without risk. So the question is, Is it riskier to let my child do something that's potentially dangerous, or to shelter them from that, in which case they may not be ready for a world that has risk in it? And I think that's just it's called the nirvana fallacy, right? Comparing something to an imagined world where there is no downside. It's like, well, no, we're comparing things that varying levels of risk in different ways. And I always, anytime people object to, letting kids do anything that's perceived as dangerous, I always like to remind them how crazy it is, if you really think about it, that we've got 15-year-olds driving automobiles 70 miles an hour on the highway with their parents yelling at them. But we're used to it. It's normal. So it's okay. If we can handle that, I think we can handle exposing kids to aeronautics and getting them up in an airplane with a highly trained pilot.
I think you and I could be a very dangerous combination. If next time you're in Colorado Springs, let's get together and or I'll come down to Florida, wherever you are. But I think there's some real synergy here. So I'd love to continue this conversation as you see fit.
It's a deal, Mark. Any final thoughts you'd love to leave with our listeners, or any recommendations for parents who are curious?
I would say, I have all these old sayings, these old men sayings, how did the turtle get on top of the fence post? Well, somebody helped her or him get there. Somebody helped me by giving me a flight scholarship when I was 15 years old, 16, because I didn't have the money to do this. One of the impediments was money. And in the aerospace aviation world, everything's expensive, and it's driven by insurance and maintenance and the cost of the airplane. Everything's expensive. And the poor kids like me, we just go in the military and get it for free, but then you got to be willing to go live overseas and fight wars and all that, which I can help. I help a lot of our kids if they want to go do that too, because I'm on our congressman's selection committee for the West Point, Annapolis, Merchant Marine Academy, Air Force Academy. So I can help them, but our main thing is let's get them certified, credentialed, and licensed while they're still in high school. Then they can go to college, but let's do it on the taxpayers' dime, and then get them ready for jobs in this country and get them internships, let them meet role models.
I love it. Mark, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.